Coming up in today's newscast, the Likud party primaries come to a close. A heavily pro-BDS documentary takes top honors at the French Foreign Press Film Awards, and the heavy hitters in Israel's medical cannabis community start preparations for exports.
Polls for the 2019 Likud party primaries closed Tuesday night with over 58% voter turnout, an increase over previous years. And though the votes are still being tallied, early reports indicate that of the 142 candidates, the same usual suspects have all come out on top. Netanyahu will assume chairmanship of the Likud automatically, though.
But with all the votes now in, Knesset Speaker Yuli Edelstein is now in first, with Transportation and Intelligence Minister Israel Katz coming up close behind him. Then the remaining top 5 spots so far are going to Public Security Minister Gilad Erdan, Culture and Sports Minister Miri Regev, and Gideon Sa'ar, who is considered Netanyahu's biggest rival within the party. In fact, Sa'ar is currently in 4th place, despite Netanyahu's campaigning against him. Now, what's also interesting about this year's primary elections, though, is that while the primaries do form the list for popularity and strength within the party, the list will not necessarily translate to preference for ministerial portfolios. In fact, reports have already indicated that Netanyahu will reward Likud loyalists first, again contributing to predictions that a Netanyahu government will look much the same as it was. Further, many of the veteran Likud members in question came out in top form in the primaries anyhow. The last 5 positions in the top 10 as of the latest count, for example, were former Jerusalem Mayor Nir Barkat and ministers Yariv Levin, Yoav Gallant, Gila Gamliel, and Avi Dichter. Finally, in addition to voting for Likud candidates in most of the top 35 spots in the list, the final few spots in the top 35 will be given to regional candidates chosen by committee, and potentially to candidates from a smaller party that may merge with the Likud at a later date.
Just a day after dozens of top Israeli politicians signed a document in support of the Nachal movement, which aims to settle at least 2 million Israelis in the West Bank, an Israeli West Bank monitoring group is now reporting that that wish might be granted sooner than later.
According to reports by the Associated Press, the West Bank Jewish Population Statistics Project is reporting that the population in Israeli settlements is exploding at rates far higher than that of the general population. In fact, the data that was published shows an increase in the settlement population of 3.3%, nearly 75% higher than the general population's growth of 1.9%. Additionally, the organization also predicted that that rate will only increase under the current political climate. Baruch Gordon, the director of the project, reportedly explained that not only are most of the settlers religious, meaning that they already have a higher birth rate than average, but also the White House's attitudes on the situation have made settlement more normalized. Speaking to the AP, Gordon said that since the change of the United States administration, the atmosphere for construction permits has become much easier. They're being given with greater ease. He added that, quote, "I think possibly the next report, and certainly in the ones after that, I think we'll start to see a huge surge in the numbers here," end quote. Now, the AP could not get the Interior Ministry to confirm these numbers, but the ministry is reportedly in contact with the project and says that the data sounds legitimate. Also, the report was compiled by former Knesset member Yoav Katz of the National Union Party.
President Donald Trump gave his second formal State of the Union address Tuesday night after a 2-week delay due to the government shutdown. And the speech also comes as Congress and the president attempted to avert another shutdown scheduled for February 15th. Ironically, despite the major divide in American politics today, though, in his speech on Tuesday, Trump championed the theme of choosing greatness, stating that, quote, "Together we can break decades of political stalemate, we can bridge old divisions, heal old wounds, build new coalitions, forge new solutions, and unlock the extraordinary promise of America's future," end quote. With respect to the Middle East, though, Trump seemed to fall back to his old braggadocious habits as he listed his various accomplishments.
One of the most complex set of challenges we face, and have for many years, is in the Middle East. Our approach is based on principled realism, not discredited theories that have failed for decades to yield progress. For this reason, my administration recognized the true capital of Israel and proudly opened the American embassy in Jerusalem.
He also repeated campaign vows to return American troops home from Syria and to confront the radical regime of Iran, saying that, quote, "They do bad, bad things. So to ensure this corrupt dictatorship never acquires nuclear weapons, I withdrew the United States from the disastrous Iran nuclear deal," end quote. Still, at the end of the Trump State of the Union address, many were left wanting, especially as Trump's approval rating has fallen down to 34% now, whereas it was 42% a month ago. And the reason, as expected, seems to be Trump's insistence on building the Mexican border wall, which even many of his own allies in the Republican Party warned him would not pass. In other news, after 2 years in office and just ahead of this week's State of the Union address, United States President Donald Trump finally appointed a new special envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism. And the new State Department employee has been named as none other than Army veteran and Los Angeles prosecutor Ilan Carr.
The JTA and the Jewish Insider News networks broke the story earlier this week, revealing the 50-year-old Carr as the new appointee. And Carr served in Iraq as a military serviceman, in LA as an anti-gang prosecutor, and he was also the former president of Jewish college fraternity AEPI. And with credentials like those, among others, it then makes sense that his confirmation has been met with approval from the political left and right alike. In fact, Democratic Representative Eliot Engel of New York wrote that he welcomed the appointment of Ilan Carr, quote, a longtime leader in the American Jewish community, end quote. And Secretary of State Mike Pompeo also commented that Carr has already played a, quote, prominent role in defending the safety of the Jewish people at home and abroad, end quote. Though while Carr's appointment to the role has been met with praise, many, including most Jewish groups in the United States, have been pressuring Trump to fill the position since taking office 2 years ago, especially as anti-Semitic attacks have continued to progress across the country. Regardless, the position is filled now, and Carr will be hitting the ground running. He's already set to head off to Slovakia and Belgium this week for his first official trip in his new capacity, where he'll attend conferences in combating anti-Semitism in Europe and elsewhere.
The S-1, or Strengthening America's Securities in the Middle East Act, was passed this week by the United States Senate, and it now only waits to pass through Congress and the President's desk. But the bill, which seeks to protect Israel from boycotts, was passed with a mostly bipartisan vote of 77 to 23. The vote was a bit askew along party lines, however, as literally all the Republican senators except for Rand Paul voted in favor of the measure, while the Democrats were split 25 to 22. And joining me now with more is Nimrod Zuta, the founder of the Trump White and Blue Facebook page. Nimrod, thank you so much for coming back in. It's been a while. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
All right, so first of all, opponents of this bill argue that it infringes on freedom of speech. What would you say to that?
Well, I don't think it's infringing freedom of speech, because we need to understand what BDS means. BDS is basically a collective punishment, right? The kind of punishment that we say that would be immoral, let's say, especially after the criticism that was heard about Trump's plan to ban the entrance of Muslims to the United States. We call that collective punishment. We said that that was immoral. That wasn't. The president has the authority to do that. But the BDS is something completely else. The BDS movement seeks to hurt the lives of all Israelis from all backgrounds, whether they support the Israeli government, whether they don't. And I think that the United States need to take a moral stance here. This is a very moral question.
What about the similar argument that has been heard a lot, in the Democratic Party and on the left in the United States particularly, in that, too many times, too often the argument goes, criticisms of Israel are accused of being anti-Semitism. How would you kind of approach that?
I don't think that every criticism of Israel means anti-Semitism. I think it's a flawed approach, but with it we need to acknowledge actual anti-Semitism, like the one that is heard by Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, that basically accused the Jewish congressmen of being dual loyalists, right, because they are Jewish. This is an outrageous claim to make. I mean, if we would have heard President Trump make some claim about Muslim members of Congress or citizens of the United States that are Muslim, that they have some sort of dual loyalty, I mean, this is outrageous. This is what we call anti-Semitism. You can criticize Israel all day long, but again, we need to remember that the BDS movement doesn't seek to criticize Israel. It seeks to basically put collective punishment upon all of its citizens using not only voluntary, not only the approach of not buying Israeli products, but also seeking that other governments would, divest and boycott Israel itself.
All right, Nimrod Zuta, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu announced on Tuesday that he will be traveling in the coming weeks to meet with Russian President Putin in Moscow. Also, the announcement was made during a press conference with Austrian President Alexander Van der Bellen, where Netanyahu reiterated his vows to prevent Iran from advancing in Syria.
I'll be going on February 21st again to Russia, following my discussions with President Putin in Paris a few months ago and subsequent phone conversations. It's very important that we continue to prevent Iran from entrenching in Syria. In many ways, we've blocked that advance, but we're committed to continuously blocking it, continuously preventing Iran from creating another war front against us right here opposite the Golan Heights. This is one of the subjects, the main subjects, that I'll be discussing with President Putin.
Further, Netanyahu added that, quote, "We have a great challenge from Iran which openly calls for our destruction. It minces no words about this. We are committed to preventing their acquisition of nuclear weapons, which would be directed at us. But we're also committed to preventing their aggression in Syria," end quote. Meanwhile, however, the Russian-made S-300 missile defense systems that were given to the Syrian Assad regime late last year are now reportedly active, potentially making operations in Syria a lot more dangerous for Israeli forces. Additionally, Iranian officials reportedly responded again on Tuesday to Israeli strikes in Syria, calling them unacceptable, and threatening that, quote, "If these actions continue, we will activate some calculated measure as a deterrent and as a firm and appropriate response to teach a lesson to the criminal and lying rulers of Israel," end quote. Netanyahu has never given much credence to these types of threats, however, and he's stated often that Israel would continue to operate in Syria and anywhere else as long as it's necessary to do so. To that end, Netanyahu and Putin also coordinate regularly over the phone and have met in person 4 times already in 2018 alone, 11 times since Russian forces entered Syria in 2015.
2 Palestinian suspects from the northern Gaza Strip were arrested Tuesday afternoon after infiltrating past a security barrier near the northern Gaza Strip. Thankfully, though, the suspects were unarmed, and they've already since been transferred for questioning. This also comes just after Israel's defense ministry reported the start of construction on the new Israel-Gaza security fence.
מנהלת גבולות ותפר, מנהלת המשותפת למשרד הביטחון וצה"ל, מתחילה כעת את השלב הראשון של הקמת הגדר העילית מעל הקיר התת-קרקעי. הגדר העילית היא גדר משמעותית מאוד, שהיא ערוכה לאיומים של עזה. החשיבות שלה היא גדולה למניעת חדירה ליישובי העוטף ובכלל למדינת ישראל. הפקנו לקחים לגדר הזאת מכלל הגבולות בארץ. אני מזכיר לכולם שביצענו 250 קילומטר בגבול ישראל-מצרים, 34 קילומטר בגבול ירדן, 110 קילומטר ברמת הגולן ועוד קילומטרים במרחב התפר.
Also, these latest reports come as a series of large-scale army drills begin across the country. First, according to the IDF, a military exercise began Wednesday morning in the area of the Ramon airport in Timna, which will last several hours. And as part of the exercise, heavy traffic of security forces and vehicles will be felt. Additionally, quote, "The exercise was planned in advance as part of the 2019 training program intended to maintain the force's competence and readiness," end quote. Test sirens were also sounded in the areas of Nu Givon, Givat Ze'ev, Jerusalem, Ma'ale Adumim, Kedar, and Ramat Rachel. Then in the north, hundreds of soldiers from the elite Givati battalion are now finishing up a simulated conflict with Lebanese terror group Hezbollah, and nearly 300 soldiers were activated for the drill that began a few months ago and is scheduled to end on Thursday. A separate but similar drill was also completed just the week before, but army officials explain that the challenges must differ as the enemy changes. That way, quote, "We will defeat the enemy in a minimum amount of time and with the minimum amount of collateral damage," end quote.
On Saturday, the movie Gaza, directed by Julio Perez del Campo, won the Best Short Documentary category at the National Goya Awards in Spain. And during his speech, the director slammed Israel and called for an international boycott. Well, ILTV's Joy Gavijon is here with more.
Hello, Aaron. So, yes, the Goya Awards are Spain's main national annual film awards, and they have a big international recognition, as many worldwide known directors and actors have been awarded over the years. Think about Pedro Almodóvar, Guillermo del Toro, Nicole Kidman, Antonio Banderas, Javier Bardem, Salma Hayek. Yeah, the list goes on. So,
all right. So, can we now apparently add the name of Julio Perez del Campo then, among others?
Exactly. Yes. In this ceremony, 2019, as you said before, the movie Gaza, directed by him, won the Best Short Documentary. Now, this short movie that goes on for 18 minutes highlights the life and day-to-day struggles of Palestinians living in the Strip after the 2014 war between Hamas and Israel. And the movie focuses on accusing and condemning Israeli actions in the Gaza Strip.
Something that apparently aligned with the director's opinions on the matter.
Yes.
I assume. So when Perez del Campo, took the stage to receive the award, he took the chance to slam Israel, you said?
Right, exactly. In his speech, Perez del Campo dedicated the award to all those who kept alive the struggle of the Palestinian people, and in his words, those who were taken from us by the Zionist terrorism. And then he went on calling on people not to, quote, be accomplices of the Israeli apartheid, and saying, Israel and Eurovision, no, please. And I have to say that he got many applauses with his statements.
All right, well, that is unfortunate, as he's now one more in the long list of people in the industry trying to boycott Eurovision in Israel.
Yes.
Were there any other responses to that, though?
Yes, of course. His words were criticized by many, among them the International League Against Racism and Anti-Semitism in Barcelona, that issued a statement condemning his speech and accusing the Spanish TV of being an accomplice. Also, the Federation of Jewish Communities of Spain expressed that Perez del Campo's speech was full of hate and that it doesn't contribute to the peace between Israelis and Palestinians in any way.
All right, well, I hate to agree, but I agree.
Yes.
Joy, thank you for your report.
Thank you, Aaron.
Moving on, a number of ultra-Orthodox Jews were just arrested this week after again violently protesting against the military draft.
Riots were split into two events Sunday night, one in Jerusalem's Mea Shearim neighborhood and another about 40 kilometers away in the Haredi Jewish village of Modi'in Illit. And in the first incident in Jerusalem, several dozen Haredi protesters blocked major roads and threw stones and debris at police in response to the arrest of a military draft dodger. 2 officers were injured in the clashes and 3 protesters were arrested. Then in Modi'in Illit, protesters similarly blocked the entrance to the area and clashed with security forces. No injuries were reported, but 4 protesters were arrested and were taken in for questioning. These are hardly isolated incidents, however, as ultra-Orthodox enlistment has long been a sharply contested issue in the Jewish state. And just a few weeks ago, hundreds of Haredi demonstrators blocked off streets in Jerusalem and fought with police again, following the arrest of yeshiva student Yitzhak Aryeh, also for defecting from the IDF. But upwards of 30 protesters were arrested during those riots for disturbing the public order and throwing bottles and debris at police. Police could only break up the protests with riot control measures like skunk, which is a foul-smelling substance sprayed over violent demonstrations. And finally, demonstrations like this are likely to continue all the way up to and potentially even after the Knesset finally votes on Haredi army conscription. The decision over their obligation to serve was only delayed after national elections were called and the government was dissolved.
Israeli police revealed Tuesday that a major local drug sting was concluded this week after an undercover agent exposed a criminal organization through an operation stretching all the way from the center of the country to northern Israel. According to police reports, dangerous drugs valued at over 500,000 shekels, along with explosive charges, grenades, and a pistol were all confiscated as part of the morning raids. And 36 suspects were also arrested and charged with drug and weapons-related offenses.
הסוכן רכש מאותם עבריינים כמויות סמים גדולות מסוגים שונים במשקלים שונים. כמו כן רכש הסוכן אמצעי לחימה מאותם עבריינים.
These raids also come just after 2 residents of the village of Gajar on the Israel-Lebanon border were arrested Sunday night for smuggling drugs. The 25 and 35-year-old suspects were found with over 25 pounds or 11 kilos of hashish on their person. Now, it's been just over a week since the Israeli government approved of the export of locally grown medical cannabis, and already there have been some major developments. First, Israeli medical cannabis company Intercure has announced plans to expand its services into at least 10 new countries over the next 2 years.
This after absorbing multiple smaller companies like medical cannabis developer Candoc leading up to today. And Intercure's chairman, former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, predicted that this is just the beginning.
We already deep into agreement with European growers in Northern Europe and then in Southern Europe, and within 18 months we probably will be in 8 to 10 different territories in 3 or 4 continents, ready to move all engines, full engines forward into this booming market.
In fact, to prepare for this boom, Intercure has already acquired over 1 metric ton of medical cannabis grown right here in the Jewish state, with the aim of producing over 100 metric tons by mid-2020. That being said, physical cannabis products aren't the only things Israel is now poised to export and share. Knowledge in the market is also where Israel is expected to excel.
We are the place where the science of cannabinoids started decades ago. We are much ahead of the others in real treatment for real patients. We have very tight regulation. Israel was the first country to issue those highly demanding standards for medical pharma-grade cannabis, which are now replicated in Germany with few modifications. We believe will follow in Great Britain, Europe, and even in the United States when they legalize medical cannabis.
Now, on a related note, a delegation of 20-some-odd Thai government officials arrived in Israel this week to establish trade and to learn from Israeli experts in medical cannabis cultivation. The delegation includes director generals in the Thai Health Ministry, as well as the entire government Pharma Directorate, and their mission will be to find the best practices in producing cannabis and cannabis products at a price that will be subsidized by the Thai government. The only real concerns, then, have come now from analysts who argue that Israel is becoming too eager to share our trade secrets. In fact, according to a Globes report, giving away too much information without filing patents properly could lead to disasters down the line.
Now, finally, for our last story of the evening, we catch up with ILTV's Adi Kaspi for a look at her latest episode of Flavors of Israel. And this week, we're talking healthy vegan and vegetarian living. Let's check it out.
So we're now at this gorgeous bar, and we're about to make two very nice cocktails.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you. Wow. This is so fresh. This looks amazing. It's absolutely, really, I'll give you an A+.
Specifically in Tel Aviv, there's a huge market for it. I mean, you have probably at least 30 exclusively vegan restaurants.
So good. So good! Yes. So now you never bake chocolate in the house?
No.
Ever?
Never.
It's always homemade?
Yes.
Wow. This is, oh my God.
See that in Israel they take in let's say original food and make it actually better.
That's what I love about this city. You have everything.
This place is so beautiful and fun to sit at. The service is great and the music is always great.
Very nice. Easy peasy.
Yes.
Whoa.
Really easy.
Okay. So we're making cheesecake from cashews.
It's my twin brother Ben. He's also.
Am I getting fooled here? Let's go and check Haya's cooking style.
Peanut butter, that's my favorite.
That's my favorite.
Peanut butter.
It's coconut. Mayo. The more the merrier. I'll invite you over to make me some, okay?
Bye.
Hi.
Salud.
And now for our Hebrew word of the day. Following the end of the Likud party's primary elections, today's word is lispor, meaning to count. Likud officials just finished lispor, or counting the votes, and it was quite the tense affair, especially as while many familiar faces made the top list, others were kicked off of it. And now we can lispor, or count, much more than just ballots in a box, though. On Sesame Street, for example, anachnu sofrim, or we count, simple things like the number of bats flying overhead. And a chaperone on a class trip needs to perform a head count, or a sofer rosh, every 5 or so minutes. One thing that you never want to lispor or count, though, are your chickens. Or at least don't count them, or al tispor otam, before they hatch. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight is expected to be mostly cloudy and with a low of 58 or 14 degrees Celsius. Then tomorrow there will be some light rain and cloudy skies with a drop in temperatures to a high of about 65 or 18 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.62 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News and on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you for watching.